Time for a bit of inspiration for you, new challenges for you to conquer, and motivational guests sharing their stories of inspiration. And Suchandrika is just that, a podcaster, writer and comedian as well. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anna Louise. How are you?
Oh, so keen to hear your story because it's it's fascinating when you hear stories of success from this year, because we've all had such a terrible and heartbreaking year and lots of distress and businesses collapsing. But someone like yourself, a creative, really making a success of it, starting stand up in January, then the world locked down. Why this year, Suchandrika? Why did you decide to get up and stand up on stage in 2020?
Because I did not foresee the pandemic coming at all. Is why.
Good job.
My comedy timing is really bad. It's a weird one, isn't it? Comedy was kind of something I always wanted to do, but I think when you're sort of outside lots of creative industries, they feel like the doors are shut. How do I get in? It's very competitive. There's often lots of work for free, and so that can feel quite forbidding. But when I started making a podcast a few years ago, that's when some people who listened to it said to me, "Oh, have you tried comedy? Have you tried stand-up?" And I was like, "That's the dream, but I'm too scared." And so it took me a few years to do a course even, and that's what I did at the start of the year. In January, I started a course at Angel Comedy, which is based in London, and that's when I first sort of got on a stage for comedy purposes. I have sort of spoken on stages before, which has helped. And then did a show at the end of that course, which was in February, and then about a month later, the world lockdown.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because although you do a course, I guess, to hone your skills and to learn the craft, you can't learn to be funny. You've either got it or you haven't.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think with stand-up, which is why the pandemic has been so difficult, you have that reading of the room. You've got to be kind of quite open to the energy you get back from the audience, to kind of glancing at the people in the front row. Do they want to be spoken to or not? How afraid are people of being spoken to? Because I would never pick on someone and be mean to them. That's just not what I'm like, and definitely not my comedy's like. The joke would always come back on me in any way. You have to kind of read the room in that sense. So I think it's a lot about empathy and having worked in spaces where you have to try to read people. So I think you can learn how to be funny.
I think you're very humble. I think you are very humble. Because to make a crowd laugh, that really is something, isn't it? Especially, like you say, not only are you storytelling and you've got this natural funny flair, but you're reading this room. These eyes are staring back at you, almost saying, go on, make me laugh, be funny, be entertaining. That's a hell of a lot of pressure.
I suppose so. I'm kind of missing that thing which makes me afraid of going on stage. And I think it's like this inbuilt belief from somewhere that people do want you to do well. Like, they want to be entertained, essentially. They want to be there to be entertained. They don't want you to freeze up. They don't want you to go silent. They want you to keep saying stuff and keep entertaining them, keep them awake. So there is that. But also what I'd say about the course and about any time someone has access to other is if you try your work out on other people and you're getting them to laugh, then that's a really good way of understanding that your work is doing the thing it needs to do, or you need to go and edit it and maybe change what that line does. Putting jokes towards the end is usually the winner, so that people laugh at the end of the line. You wait and then you carry on. So that's kind of jokes 101.
But there's so much to juggle with stand-up, isn't there? It's not like you're... I mean, I'm not making any kind of theatre or musical theatre or acting sound easy. Of course, it's a whole different skill in itself. But you are, on that stage, you're all immersed in your performance. You're focusing on your lyrics or your lines and your solo performance and your actors around you. But with stand-up, there's this sort of level of analysis going on at the same time as you're delivering these lines.
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? I say that I could never be an actor or sing on stage. I can't sing and I can't memorise lines in the way that you have to for acting. But what I can do is sort of memorise the beats of the performance and the rhythm to a certain extent and the points I need to get to. But it has something in common with people who perform other kinds of work, in that it's not completely me when I'm on stage. Like, there's a veneer that comes over and that enables me to just get through it somehow. But I agree with you that also you just keep being responsive to the audience, which is slightly different to other kinds of performance.
And it must help to have that barrier up a bit as well when you are greeted with all these hundreds of faces, to kind of make sure that your private life is and yourself is kind of kept, safe behind some sort of barrier, so that you don't feel fully exposed on stage when you're telling these stories.
Yeah, definitely. I think that stand-up it can be very confessional. It's the I pronoun you're always using. You do live through your life, but I think it's important for me to fictionalize it to quite a huge degree. So, for instance, the first set I did, I'm pretending I'm speaking to my niece who's a toddler. I never name her. I wouldn't put any details about her in public, but I immediately have this sort of aunt character who then becomes quite bizarre and embellishes stories and a bit inappropriate. And so this character that's not entirely me, but I sort of take how I am with my niece and then sort of ramp it up.
I was going to ask you if that aunt character was 100% you, bringing out elements of your character and your soul, but it's kind of a bit of a persona, a bit of a sort of exaggerated character.
It has, and in its roots, I think, something that a lot of people are thinking about, particularly people with kids and people who spend time with kids, which is that in 20 years' time, my niece will turn around and say, my second birthday happened during lockdown. What was it like? What happened? And I'll be like, oh, back in the old days, like, this is what happened. And, well, I hope she's interested. She might not be. But I just thought, how do you explain this time? It was so weird and hopefully a one-off. So what will we tell the next generation about this?
Is it always inspiration in your own life that you find for your comic material? Or do you kind of hunt and gather and pick things from your friends' lives and everyone you know?
Oh, definitely my friends' lives. None of them are safe at all. Friends and family are not safe. What I would never do, I wouldn't name anyone, or I wouldn't do anything like that. But the next set I did was about hen dos and how they work on lockdown. So if you get a stripper, does he socially distance? There's a lot of issues there.
I never even thought about that.
Well, it's because one of my friends was getting married, and unfortunately she's had to move it to next year, and so we were discussing a hen do, and actually in real life she would hate a stripper, which is fine, but it just got me thinking. I think the what if, so you take what happens in life, and I'm a freelance journalist as well, and often the best stories come from your friends going, well, this has happened, or this is a norm, like this is missing, and then kind of going, well, what if other people feel this way is often what works in terms of freelance journalism. So then you have a trend, and in terms of stand-up, what if, I think for my humour is what if it's kind of ridiculous stuff, like spiralling into that can't happen. And that's, for me, that amuses me and hopefully other people as well.
I bet your friends are always just slightly on edge as to whether it will make it into your sketches. I know that mine sometimes say, oh no, Anna, is that going on the radio? And I'm like, yeah, but I won't mention your name, or I won't tell it exactly like this, or, I won't reveal you to be who you are. It's quite entertaining, isn't it? That kind of finding that line between your creative career and how your life might feed into that, and also where the boundary is.
Yeah, you're completely right that your job would definitely have that as well. They're like, oh no, I've told her this thing. And so you feel that responsibility for people who don't have the same platform as you and who aren't necessarily going to go on the stage or have a radio show and talk about themselves. So you would just fictionalise them a little bit, just like take away the name, take it a few removes away from them, and just make sure that they're not going to feel, that they've been used or anything. So that'd be the last thing I would want. You want them to laugh along with it, to enjoy the fact that something from their life fuels your creativity. That's the ideal, I'd say.
It's interesting. I mean, you say bad timing to start stand-up in January, but I think great timing, because you got to the semi-finals of the Funny Women's Stage Awards 2020, you've been named as a one to watch, all whilst actually there haven't been able to be any events or gigs. How have you managed that?
I mean, Funny Women, they did such an incredible job putting on a competition at this time. So I'd say they put in so much effort. They also kind of, the organisers, put in a lot of time to make sure that we all felt comfortable as semi-finalists. There were 16 of us. We were on Zoom calls. We were trying to work out, how do you take a performance that was on stage and put it on screen? How do you set up your living room? They helped us out with lighting, things like that, just to make our performances look good. And then there were lots of judges and other people in the kind of audience. And what we could do is tell our friends and family to get tickets, which I believe started at free, and you could then donate. And then they could also sit in the front row. So what you had is, with Zoom, lots of people on there who you couldn't see or hear, but people could buy those front row tickets, which a lot of gigs do now, and you could hear them. And so that's really nice, that you can hear the laughter, and that there are people who care about your performance there. And so then it was a case of, how do I adapt this for a screen, and I thought I'm going to acknowledge the fact this is on a screen as opposed to on a stage, and I'm going to play with that a little bit. But it was, everyone had very different styles and did it really differently. And I'm so glad I just entered that competition because it taught me a lot, and it's really helped my career.
And has that been enough to quench your thirst, having these virtual Zoom performances, instead of having that live event feel?
I haven't ended up doing much more of them because I've got into writing a bit more. I'd say that I know anyone who puts on a Zoom night is going to a lot of effort and is really trying to make this weird new normal work. But like all comedians, I really miss being on stage. There's nothing like the adrenaline. There's something special about a room full of people actually being there. Like all human beings, we miss each other's face-to-face company, don't we?
I can't wait to bring back the live event, the live party, when we can all gather together. Before you go, please share a bit of advice. What advice would you give to budding comedians sitting listening to this right now, inspired by you, but full of doubt?
I would look at a course, actually, because you'd be surprised that I needed permission to get up on the stage somehow. And also, you try that material out on other people. So I think a lot of nerves are quelled by the fact that I've made people laugh already with this set. So that's really helpful. And I don't know how to make other people believe this, but the belief that people are watching you on stage because they enjoy you, so they don't want to see you fail. If there is someone who wants to see you fail in that audience, they're your enemy, and that means your life is very exciting and enjoy having an enemy.
Brilliant advice. Suchandrika, where can we find you for those listening who want to follow your journey?
I think Twitter is probably the best place, so at Suchandrika C is where you can find me.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey, how you started and your 2020 with us.
Thanks for having me.
Come on the show again, won't you?
Of course. Thank you so much.
Speak soon. You're listening to Anna Louise here on BBC Radio Kent. Let's get the latest, shall we?
BBC Sounds app. On your smart speaker.
Play BBC Radio Kent.